Okay, let's talk about Catelyn V. Catelyn V is a notorious chapter. The fandom argues about Catelyn V quite a bit because there are Catelyn haters out there, and they use Catelyn V as the basis of their hatred of Catelyn rather than their own sexism. The primary reason that you can't really um, pin things on Catelyn like this is that all of the characters do really stupid things at various points, but it seems that Catelyn isn't the one that's. It seems that Catelyn gets the criticism for her choice as well. Everyone else kind of, goes free, and everyone says, "Oh, that's fine." Like Jaime throwing Bran from a tower is somehow a forgivable offense, or Ned not immediately telling Robert everything and revealing things to his friend and working things out. These very obvious things that other characters could do to prevent all of the action are ignored, and yet Catelyn's choice in this chapter is scrutinized. And I also believe wrongly, because Catelyn doesn't have all of the information. She believes that, and we're talking about the arrest of Tyrion, that somehow the whole war is Catelyn's fault. Catelyn, one, did not know that Ned is temporarily not hand for a second, that he's going to quit over the Daenerys incident. She doesn't know that Tywin has an irrational hatred of his son and would do reckless things even though she has him as a hostage. She doesn't know that her sister has gone insane. All of these things are factors where Catelyn has incomplete information, but based on the information she has, she's thinking she's making a good choice at the time. She thinks her sister is sane and would be on her side. She thinks that her husband is actively hand ruling the kingdom. She thinks that Tywin would act like a rational actor and love his child and be motivated by her having a hostage. That aside, that discussion aside, because people have had this hating Catelyn discussion forever. Catelyn V is a really dumb chapter. It's a dumb premise. I understand that it pushes the action forward, but there is I cannot think of a more ridiculous situation happening in the entire series. And I give a lot of crap to Catelyn 4, because Catelyn 4 is ridiculous as well. We know that George had a plan to have Catelyn go north of the Wall, and that was going to be her adventure north of the Wall, and he changed it. And the change is very abrupt. Catelyn goes from a woman who wants to be with Bran day and night and isn't sleeping because she's fearful that he is going to die and she will not be there when he dies, to immediately saying, I need to go to King's Landing to see Ned. Outrageously, because one, she doesn't need to go to King's Landing because she can just send Sir Roderick. But her logic is, but he wouldn't believe Sir Roderick. Of course he's going to believe Sir Roderick. Like, the whole premise of her leaving King's Landing was poorly thought out. And it happens completely irrationally. She just changes. And some people will say, well, she was attacked and that awoken something in her. She's not being rational. Okay, fine. Let's just accept, we accept that she comes to King's Landing now, and by ship. And then for some reason, even though she came to King's Landing by ship, she decides not to go back home by ship because Roderick gets seasick or something, like her reasoning. Fine. So she's on the road. The coincidence of her running into Tyrion at the end of the crossroads, it's not just a coincidence of timing, like, okay, they're on the same road, maybe they would hit each other, but there's no reason they would ever be at the end of the crossroads. It is the worst jetpacking in the entire series. People talk about Stannis getting to the Wall really fast, and George tries to explain it with really great winds and things like this. But look at this, okay? Catelyn leaves King's Landing before news of Bran's recovery has come, because we have a chapter with Ned and his daughters. Actually, that's an Arya chapter, but in the Arya chapter, they find out that Bran has woken up. Kat's not there unless she's staying in Littlefinger's brothel for 2 months or something. And Ned has secretly been seeing Kat in the evenings, but there's no reference to that. But Kat leaves before Bran wakes up, and Tyrion is at the wall when Bran wakes up. And somehow Tyrion makes it all the way down to the inn at the crossroads, while Catelyn only goes up a little bit to the inn at the crossroads. Tyrion, her trip is, 2 to 3 weeks. His trip should be a couple months, and yet they somehow hit the end of the crossroads. Tyrion has the most incredible jetpack in the entire series. And this really gets back to the Catelyn choice. And why does Catelyn do what she does? Because George needs it to happen. Like, he needs the War of the Five Kings to happen. She needs to be here so that she'll decide to go to the Vale. Realistically, they'd be hitting each other maybe, sometime more north of Moat Cailin, and she would go to the, Barrowton or something like that. Realistically, that's where they should have hit, like Barrowton. And it would have been a completely different situation, but instead it's at the crossroads. The entire premise of the chapter is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous chapter. It's ridiculous happenstance. It shouldn't have happened. It is an outrageous jetpacking of Tyrion to have this happen. But George needed it to happen. But anyway, Catelyn is a very short chapter. It happened. He wrote it during his slow period. Again, the previous chapters we were talking about written later and inserted. But here we are. Let's get into it. Catelyn. My lady, you ought to cover your head, Sir Roderick told her as their horses plodded north. You will take a chill. It's only water, Sir Roderick, Catelyn replied. Her hair hung wet and heavy, a loose strand stuck to her forehead, and she could imagine how ragged and wild she must look. But for once she did not care. The southern rain was soft and warm. Catelyn liked the feel of it on her face, gentle as a mother's kiss. It took her back to her childhood, to long, gray days at River Run. She remembered the godswood, drooping branches heavy with moisture, and the sound of her brother's laughter as he chased her through the piles of damp leaves. Of course, there's no werewood, even though later there's a werewood at River Run. There's no werewood here, because there was a retcon with putting the werewood south of the neck. But she remembered making mud pies with Lysa, the weight of them, the mud slick and brown between her fingers. They had served them to Littlefinger, giggling, and he'd eaten so much mud he was sick for a week. How young they'd all been. At the beginning of the story, she feels uncomfortable in a godswood with a werewood. And here she is, actually, her primary childhood memories are playing in the godswood, which later is established that there's a werewood there. So it's very... the way, it doesn't make any sense at all, but here we are. Catelyn had almost forgotten. In the north, the rain fell cold and hard, and sometimes at night it turned to ice. It was likely to kill a crop. It was likely to kill a crop as nurture it, and it sent grown men running for the nearest shelter. There was no rain for little girls to play in. I am soaked through, Sir Roderick complained. Even my bones are wet. The woods pressed close around them, and the steady pattering of rain on leaves was accompanied by the small sucking sounds the horses made as their hooves pulled free of the mud. We will want a fire tonight, my lady, and a hot meal would serve us both. There is an inn at the crossroads up ahead, Catelyn told him. She had slept many a night there in her youth, traveling with her father. Lord Hoster Tully had been a restless man in his prime, always riding somewhere. She still remembered the innkeep, a fat woman named Masha Heddle, who chewed sour leaf night and day and seemed to have an endless supply of smiles and sweet cakes for the children. The sweet cakes had been soaked with honey, rich and heavy on the tongue, but how Catelyn had dreamed those smiles. The sour leaf had stained Masha's teeth a dark red and made her smile a bloody horror. Yeah, it's very funny that Catelyn is a restless man and takes Catelyn. Hoster is a restless man, takes Catelyn everywhere. He likes to travel, and yet for some reason they didn't go to Harrenhal, and no one knows, like the Harrenhal tourney. No one knows why. In at the Crossroads isn't very far from Harrenhal, but Masha Heddle. The Heddles are an odd house because later George establishes, much later, that the Heddles were a house that were important in the Blackfyre Rebellion. And yet Masha Heddle seems like somebody that's, not highborn, She seems like an innkeep, but, you don't think of a highborn lady chewing sour leaf and running an inn, An inn, Sir Roderick repeated wistfully. If only, but we dare not risk it. If we wish to remain unknown, I think it best we seek out some small holdfast. He broke off as they heard sounds up the road, splashing water, the clink of mail, a horse's whinny. Riders, he warned, his hand dropping to the hilt of his sword. Even on the King's Road, it never hurt to be wary. They followed the sounds around a lazy bend of the road and saw them, a column of armored men noisily fording a swollen stream. Catelyn reined up to let them pass. The banner in the hand of the foremost rider hung sodden and limp, but the guardsmen wore indigo cloaks, and around their shoulders flew the silver eagle of Seaguard. Malisters, Sir Roderick whispered to her, as if she had not known. My lady, best pull up your hood. Catelyn made no move. Lord Jason Mallister himself rode with them, surrounded by his knights, his son Patrick by his side, and their squires close behind. They were riding for King's Landing, and the hand's tourney she knew. For the past week, the travelers had been thick as flies upon the King's Road. Knights and free riders, singers with their harps and drums, heavy wagons laden with hops or corn or casks of honey, traders and craftsmen and whores, and all of them moving south. She studied... Now, by the way, just on a time thing, keep in mind that in about two chapters, I'm trying to think of... it's very soon that the hand's tourney is coming. And yet, so Mallister is going to get to King's Landing in the next chapter. Mallister is getting into the hand's tourney in the next chapter. And yet it's taken Catelyn, all of this time to get to the Crossroads. And Tyrion has warped from the wall to get here. It's ridiculous. She studied Lord Jason boldly. Last time she'd seen him, he had been jesting with her uncle at her wedding feast. The Mallisters stood bannermen to the Tullys, and his gifts had been lavish. So this is pretty crazy that it's been a good 15 years since she's last seen Jason Mallister. His brown hair was salted with white now, his face chiseled gaunt by time, yet the years had not touched his pride. He rode like a man who feared nothing. Catelyn envied him in that. She had come to fear so much. As the riders passed, Lord Jason nodded a curt greeting, but it was only a high lord's courtesy to strangers chance met on the road. There was no recognition in those fierce eyes, and his son did not even waste a look. They did not know you, Sir Roderick said after, wondering. He saw a pair of mud-spattered travelers by the side of the road, wet and tired. It would never occur to him to suspect that one of them was the daughter of his liege lord. I think we shall be safe enough at the inn, Sir Roderick. It was near dark when they reached it, at the crossroads north of the great confluence of the Trident. Masha Heddle was fatter and grayer than Catelyn remembered, still chewing her sour leaf, but she gave them only the most cursory of looks, and nary a hint of her ghastly red smile. 2 rooms at the top of the stairs, that's all there is, she said, chewing all the while. They're under the bell tower. You won't be missing meals. Though there's some thinks it's too noisy, can't be helped. We're full up, or near as makes no matter. It's those rooms or the road. It was those rooms. Low, dusty garrets at the top of the cramped, narrow staircase. Leave your boots down here, Masha told them after she'd taken their coin. The boy will clean them. I don't have you tracking mud up my stairs. Mind the bell. Those who come late to meals don't eat. There were no smiles and no mentions of sweet cakes. Yeah, even the way Masha Heddle speaks, it's like she's lowborn. She's lowborn. I mean, one could argue that the Heddles must have fallen far after the Blackfire Rebellion, and they just don't have that much money anymore, or something like that. It's that she's running her own inn now rather than having some underling do it. When the supper bell rang, the sound was deafening. Catelyn had changed into dry clothes. She sat by the window, watching rain run down the pane. The glass was milky and full of bubbles, and a wet dusk was falling outside. Catelyn could just make out the muddy crossings where the 2 great roads met. So I do find that when George is in his writer's block periods, he writes long, flowery, beautiful prose, and that things don't really, go anywhere. This is a remarkably short chapter. It's only about 3,500 words. And so you can tell that like George is killing time. Like it's beautiful prose and it's great atmosphere. And there's little bits about Catelyn's backstory and things like that. But it's mostly just, it is just spinning wheels here because it's beautiful, but nothing's happening. She's looking at glass. She's getting the atmosphere of the rain. This is George in his writing block. So, and I mean, he's struggling to even put enough words to make this a full chapter. The crossroads gave her pause. If they turned west from here, it was an easy ride down to River Run. Her father had always given her wise counsel when she needed it most, and she yearned to talk to him, to warn him of the gathering storm. If Winterfell needed to brace for war, how much more so River Run, so much closer to King's Landing, with the power of Casterly Rock looming to its west like a shadow. If only her father had been stronger, she might have chanced it. But Hoster Tully had been bedridden these past 2 years, and Catelyn was loath to tax him now. I mean, it's not like he doesn't. I mean, her brother's there, his Castellan, things like that. These little things where they've got to. The plot has to move where the plot has to move. She's not very far. She's not very far from River Run. And considering how far she's going to Winterfell, it's quite a reasonable detour. Like think about this. Like she is here at the Rin at the crossroads, near the God's Eye. She only has to go a couple weeks journey to River Run to warn them, and then she can get back on the road and go up to Winterfell. Because it's kind of a triangle, she might lose like a week or 2 in travel time, but we're talking about a travel time of a couple months to get back to Winterfell, or in a month and a half to get back to Winterfell. It's almost ridiculous that she's not going to River Run to warn her family or sending them ravens and things like this. But the plot has to go where the plot has to go. The eastern road was wilder and more dangerous, climbing through rocky foothills and thick forests into the mountains of the moon, past high passes and deep chasms to the Vale of Arryn and the stony fingers beyond. Above the vale, the Eyrie stood high and impregnable, the towers reaching for the sky. There she would find her sister and perhaps some of the answers Ned sought. Surely Lysa knew more than she had dared to put in her letter. She might have the very proof that Ned needed to bring the Lannisters to ruin, and if it came to war, they would need the Arryns and the Eastern lords who owed them service. Also, she should probably just be going to the Vale. Like, it's very odd, that like, okay, rather than like, I've got really immediate news that I need to get to people, but I am going to spend 6 weeks to 2 months on the road because Sir Roderick might get seasick. It's like either take the ship, get back to Winterfell, or head to these other locations, head to Riverrun, head to the Eyrie. Instead, the choice is taking the long road, the King's Road. It's silly, but plot's got to go where the plot's got to go. Yet the mountain road was perilous. Shadowcats prowled those passes. Rock slides were common, and the mountain clans were lawless brigands descending from the height to rob and kill and melting away like snow whenever the knights rode out of the Vale to search of them. Even Jon Arryn, as great a lord as the Eyrie had ever known, had always traveled in strength when he crossed the mountains. Catelyn's only strength was one elderly knight, armored in loyalty. No, she thought, Riverrun and the Eyrie would have to wait. Her path ran north to Winterfell, where her sons and her duty were waiting for her. As soon as they were safely past the neck, she could declare herself one of Ned's bannermen and send riders racing ahead with orders to mount and watch on the King's Road. Yeah, a bit odd considering that like she could have just done that to the Mallisters, like who just passed her. I mean, they're her father's bannermen. She could have declared right there, but okay. I mean, she's feeling insecure that she only has this one guard. Plot's got to go where the plot's got to go. The rain obscured the fields beyond the crossroads, but Catelyn saw the land clear enough in her memory. The marketplace was just across the way, and the village a mile farther on. 100 white cottages surrounded a small stone sept, and there would be more now. The summer had been long and peaceful. North of here, the King's Road ran along the green fork of the Trident, through fertile valleys and green woodlands, past thriving towns and stout holdfasts and castles of the river lords. Catelyn knew them all. The Blackwoods and the Brackens, ever enemies. Those quarrels her father had obliged to settle. Lady Went, last of her line, who dwelt with her ghosts in the cavernous vaults of Harrenhal. Erasable Lord Frey, who had outlived 7 wives and filled twin castles with children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and bastards and grand-bastards as well. All of them were bannermen to the Tullys, their sworn swords into service of Riverrun. Catelyn wondered if that would have been enough if it came to war. Her father was the staunchest man who'd ever lived, and she had no doubt that he would call his banners. But would the banners come? The Darrys and Rygers and Mootons had sworn oaths to Riverrun as well. Yet they had fought with Rhaegar Targaryen on the Trident, while Lord Frey had arrived with his levies well after the battle was over, leaving some to doubt as to which army he had planned to join. Theirs, he had assured the victors solemnly in the aftermath, but ever after, her father had called him the late Lord Frey. It must not come to war, Catelyn thought fervently. They must not let it. Sir Roderick came for her just as the bell ceased its clangor. We had best make haste if we hope to eat tonight, my lady. It might be safer if we were not knight and lady until we pass the neck, she told him. Common travelers attract less notice. A father and daughter taken to the road on some family business, say. As you say, my lady, Sir Roderick agreed. It was only then that she laughed and he realized what he'd done. The old courtesies die hard, my daughter. He tried to tug at his missing whiskers and sighed with exasperation. Catelyn took his arm. Come, father, he said. You'll find that Masha Heddle sets a good table, I think. But try not to praise her. You truly don't want to see her smile. A lot of world building here, establishing the geography of the Riverlands and the Vale and who the bannermen are, and such. The common room was long and draughty, with a row of huge wooden kegs at one end and a fireplace at the other. A serving boy ran back and forth with skewers of meat while Masha drew beer from the kegs, chewing her sour leaf all the while. The benches were crowded, townsfolk and farmers mingling freely with all manner of travelers. The crossroads made for odd companions, dryers with black and purple hands, shared a bench with rivermen reeking of fish. An ironsmith, thick with muscle, squeezed in beside a wizened old septon. Hard bitten sellswords and soft, plump merchants swapped news like boon companions. The company included more sellswords than Catelyn would have liked. 3 by the fire wore red stallion badges of the Brackens, and there was a large party in blue steel ringmail and capes of silvery grey. On their shoulders were another familiar sigil, the twin towers of House Frey. She studied their faces, but they were all too young to have known her. The senior among them would have been no older than Bran when she went north. Sir Roderick found them an empty place on the bench near the kitchen. Across the table, a handsome youth was fingering a wood harp. 7 blessings to you, good folk, he said as they sat. An empty wine cup stood on the table before them. And to you, singer, Catelyn returned. Sir Roderick called for bread and meat and beer in the tone that meant now. The singer, a youth of some 18 years, eyed them boldly and asked where they were going, and from whence they had come, and what news they had, letting the questions fly as quick as arrows and never pausing for an answer. We left King's Landing a fortnight ago, Catelyn replied, answering the safest of his questions. So there we go. They left King's Landing a fortnight ago. So, somehow, Tyrion has gotten from the Wall to the inn at the crossroads in 2 weeks. I mean, the only other explanation is that Catelyn was just like chilling in King's Landing for like 2 months, doing nothing, living at the brothel. Ned was seeing her, keeping it a full-on secret, not mentioning it all, like not updating her on Bran, on the book, on the bastard, all of the sorts of things that he'd been doing, like all the super sleuth stuff. He obviously never thinks about Catelyn, so we assume that Catelyn is not in the city, And Catelyn never thinks about all of the information that happens in King's Landing, since we don't not know in this chapter if she knows if Bran is awake or not. We just don't know, because that information was introduced to King's Landing after she disappeared from the story. So, and it's just never fucking mentioned. Like, it's never mentioned whether she knows Bran is awake or not. Too fucking jetpack Tyrion. That's where I'm bound, the youth said. This is, of course, Marillion. There's a theory that Marillion is watching them and purposely is inserting himself here because of all the people that he's bothering. There's a huge crowded place. That's where I'm bound, the youth said, as she had suspected. He was more interested in telling his own story than hearing theirs. Singers loved nothing half so well as the sound of their own voices. The hands turning means rich lords and fat purses. The last time she came away with more silver than I could carry, or would have, if I hadn't lost it all betting on the Kinslayer to win that day. We're getting into the Joffrey name day tourney and the famous loss of Jaime to Loras. The gods frown on the gambler, Sir Roderick said sternly. He was of the north and shared the Stark's view on tournaments. They frowned on me for certain, the singer said. Your cruel gods and the Night of the Flowers all together did me in. No doubt that was a lesson for you, Sir Roderick said. It was. This time my coin will champion Sir Loras. This is a really weird kind of thing, because it's Sir Roderick. And so this idea that when he says that the gods frown on the gambler, he means the new gods, right? He means the 7. The assumption here is that Sir Roderick is some sort of convert to the faith of the 7 here by being a knight. But then it's like he's of the north and shares the Stark views on tournaments, which would mean that like the old gods don't like tournaments and gambling. The now, of course, like you know, Christianity, Catholicism, what George is basing the seven on, gambling is a sin, and it's not something smiled upon. So it would make very much sense that Sir Roderick would be saying this from the view of a follower of the seven, and yet she has here, oh, it's because he's a northerner. It's very very funny line. Um, and then he says, "They frowned on me for certain. Your cruel gods and the Night of the Flowers did me in." Who's who's gods? Is he saying he's an atheist, or is he saying like I recognize you guys as northerners, and therefore your old gods did that to me? It's odd. This whole chapter, man. I know it's like I know I'm complaining so much about this chapter, but it's just like it's it's slapped together so weirdly. Um, I just what did I just come off of praising like the Samuel chapter, the John Samuel chapter, and here this chapter, man. No doubt that was a lesson for you. It was. This time my coin will champion Sir Loras. Sir Roderick tried to give a tug at whiskers that were not there, but before he could frame a rebuke, the serving boy came scurrying up. He laid trenchers of bread before them and filled them with chunks of brown meat off a skewer, dripping with hot juice. Another skewer held tiny onions, fire peppers, and fat mushrooms. Sir Roderick set to lustily as the lad set to lustily. Set to lustily as the lad ran back to fetch them beer. My name is Marillion, the singer said, plucking a string of his wood harp. Doubtless you've heard of me play somewhere. Marillion is named for the Silmarillion, not the band Marillion, which is also named for the Silmarillion. Both George and the band like chose the name Marillion based on the Silmarillion and shortened it the same way. But yeah, no, George had no idea that the band Marillion existed. He was naming it after the Silmarillion. Doubtless you've heard me play somewhere. His manner made Catelyn smile. Few wandering singers ever ventured as far north as Winterfell, but she knew his like from her girlhood in Riverrun. I fear not, she told him. He drew a plaintive chord from the wood harp. That is your loss, he said. Who is the finest singer you've ever heard? Alia of Bravos, Sir Roderick answered at once. We put this joke in the fanfic too. Oh, I'm much better than that old stick, Marillion said. If you have the silver for a song, I'll gladly show you. I might have a copper or two, but I'd sooner toss down a well than pay for a howling, Sir Roderick groused. His opinion of singers was well known. Music was a lovely thing for girls, but he could not comprehend why any healthy boy would fill his head with a harp when he might have had a sword. Your Sir Roderick, the sexist macho man. Your grandfather has a sour nature, Marillion said to Catelyn. I meant to do you honor, an homage to your beauty. In truth, I was made to sing for kings and high lords. Oh, I can see that. This is, this foreshadowing because Marillion is going to become Lysa's favorite. Oh, I can see that, Catelyn said. Lord Tully is fond of song, I hear. No doubt you've been to Riverrun. 100 times, the singer said airily. They keep a chamber for me, and the young lord is like a brother. Catelyn smiled, wondering what Edmure would think of that. Another singer had once bedded a girl her brother fancied. He hated the breed ever since. And Winterfell, he asked him, have you traveled north? Why would I? This singer thing comes back with Edmure over and over again, that he hates the singing and he hates the floppy fish and things like that. Why would I? Marillion asked. It's all blizzards and bearskins up there. And the Starks know no music but the howling of wolves. Distantly, he was aware of the door banging open at the far end of the room. Um, there is a story later of Singer coming that Ned keeps around for Sansa for a while. Um, so there would be reason for singers to go. I mean, there's good money to be made, and um, it's funny because when we do get to the Harvest Festival and then back to Winterfell and A Dance with Dragons, they seem to be totally into singers as well. Everybody's really into them at the Harvest Festival and everything. So it's a bit odd because that we've established here that it doesn't seem that if we're talking about being of the North that Roderick doesn't like singers, and then Marillion confirms that the North doesn't like singers, and she's saying that the Riverlands seems to love singers. In fact, she says right here, his opinion of singers was well known. Music was a lovely thing for girls, but not. What back here he says he was of the North, right? Oh, that's of tournaments, but still, it does seem like he's saying that they're just this cold, funless group up north. But later we find at the Harvest Festival and at Winterfell with Mance Rayder coming in and everything that's completely untrue. That the Northerners love singers too, or it's probably a retcon. Innkeep, a servant's voice called out. We have horses that want stabling, and my Lord of Lannister requires a room and a hot bath. Whew. I mean, he gets dirty with that. The jetpack and its exhaust fumes. You can imagine how dirty he is. Oh gods, Sir Roderick said before Catelyn, reaching out to silence him. Her fingers tightened around his forearm. Masha Heddle was bowing, bowling, and smiling her hideous red smile. I'm sorry, my lord. There's another thing. My lord. Right. George isn't, I understand, in A Dance with Dragons, there's a whole chapter in with Reek where Roose Bolton talks about the difference between my lord and my lord. He's not very careful, actually, himself with my lord and my lord earlier. And so it's like Masha Heddle should not be saying my lord if she's highborn, but my lord. I'm sorry, my lord. Truly, we're full up, every room. There were 4 of them, Catelyn saw, an old man in the black of the Night's Watch, 2 servants and him, standing there small and bold as life. My men will steep in the I guess it would be sleep. Sleep in their stables. As for myself, well, I do not require a large room, as you can plainly see. He flashed a mocking grin. So long as the fire is warm and the straw reasonably free of fleas, I am a happy man. Marshal Heddle was beside herself. My lord, there's nothing. It's the tourney. There's no help for it. Oh. Tyrion Lannister pulled a coin from his purse and flicked it over his head. He caught it again. Even across the room where Catelyn sat, the wink of gold was unmistakable. A free rider in a faded blue coat lurched to his feet. You're welcome in my room, my lord. Now there's a clever man, Lannister said as he sent the coin spinning across the room. The free rider snatched it from the air, and a nimble one to boot. The dwarf turned back to Masha Heddle. You'll be able to manage food, I trust. Anything you like, my lord, anything at all, the innkeeper promised. And may he choke on it, Catelyn thought. But it was Bran she saw choking, drowning on his own blood. Again, no mention of whether or not Bran is awake or asleep here, because I don't know if George knew timeline-wise what he was doing, because clearly the timeline does not make any sense here. I mean, everything. The northern culture and the southern culture doesn't make sense. Catelyn's choices on taking the road and going north rather than River Run or the Erie don't make any sense. It's just this is a beautiful, beautiful chapter, but it's just such a fucking disaster. In the nicest way. I mean, we all love this scene. It's very exciting when she takes Tyrion. It's very exciting. But the way that everything is crammed together to get here is just. Lannister glanced at the nearest table. My men will have whatever you're serving these people, double portions. We've had a long, hard ride. Has it been long? I'll take a roast fowl, chicken, duck, pigeon. It makes no matter. I'll send up a flagon of your best wine. Yoren, will you sup with me? Aye, my lord, I will, the black brother replied. The dwarf had not so much as glanced towards the far end of the room, and Catelyn was thinking how grateful she was for the crowded benches between them, when suddenly Marillion bounded to his feet. My lord of Lannister, he called out, I would be pleased to entertain you while you eat. Let me sing you the lay of your father's great victory at King's Landing. So here's the other thing. So as coincidental as this meeting at this inn, Marillion is the agent that is causing the connection of movement, which brings in the Marillion is sneaky. There's some sort of basis to Marillion. Like, he's lying about everything, right? You know, and here he seems to be making the connection between Cat and Tyrion, because otherwise they would have said nothing. Nothing would be likely to ruin my supper, the dwarf said dryly. His mismatched eyes considered the singer briefly, started to move away, and found Catelyn. He looked at her for a moment, puzzled. She turned her face away, but too late. The dwarf was smiling. Lady Stark, what an unexpected pleasure, he said. I was sorry to miss you at Winterfell. Marillion gaped at her, confusion giving way to chagrin as Catelyn rose slowly to her feet. She heard Sir Roderick curse. If only the man had lingered at the wall, she thought. If only. If only he didn't speed down, like take his jetpack and get down here. Oh, so many things. So many things. Like, why didn't she command the Mallisters to escort her north? Why didn't she visit River Run? Why didn't she take a ship? Why is it taking so long for her to get north and so quick for him to get south? Lady Stark? Masha Heddle said thickly. I was still Catelyn Tully the last time I bedded here, she told the innkeep. She could hear the muttering, feel the eyes upon her. Catelyn glanced around the room at the faces of the knights and sworn swords, and took a deep breath to slow the frantic beating of her heart. Did she dare take the risk? There was no time to think it through, only the moment of the sound of her voice ringing in her ears. You in the corner, she said, to an older man she had not noticed until now. It is that black band of Harrenhal I see embroidered on your surcoat, sir. The man got to his feet. It is my lady. And is Lady Went a true and honest friend to my father, Lord Hoster Tully of Riverrun? She is, the man replied stoutly. Sir Roderick rose quietly and loosened his sword in its scabbard. The dwarf was blinking at them, blank-faced with puzzlement in his mismatched eyes. The red stallion was ever a welcome sight in Riverrun, she said to the trio by the fire. My father counts Jonas Bracken amongst his oldest and most loyal bannermen. The three men-at-arms exchanged uncertain looks. Our lord is honored by his trust, one of them said hesitantly. I envy your father all these fine friends, Lannister quipped, but I do not quite see the purpose of this, Lady Stark. She ignored him, turning to the large party in blue and gray. They were the heart of the matter. There are more than 20 of them. I know your sigils as well, the twin towers of Frey. How fares your good lord, sirs? Their captain rose. Lady Walder is well, my lady. He plans to take a new wife on his 90th name day, and he asks your lord father to honor the wedding with his presence. Tyrion Lannister sniggered. That was when Catelyn knew he was hers. This man came a guest into my house, and there conspired to murder my son, a boy of 7, she proclaimed to the room at large, pointing. Sir Roderick moved to her side, his sword in his hand. In the name of King Robert and the good lords you serve, I call upon you to seize him and help me return him to Winterfell to await the king's justice. She did not know what was more satisfying, the sound of a dozen swords drawn at once, as one, or the look on Tyrion Lannister's face. So there it is. I mean, a very fun ending, absolutely. The very fun ending of her calling out her swords and but it is also odd that like she, could have done this on the road and had plenty of people escorting her home. I'm a broken record here. This is a fun. The character of Marillion is great. The ending is fantastic. It is a very short chapter, and it's mostly atmosphere and geography, and the whole thing makes no sense. And people argue about it over the wrong reason. They argue about it over Catelyn because mainly Catelyn's hated for sexist reasons. Let's be honest. But people give passes to all the other characters, especially the main characters, but not her. And but again, like Catelyn doesn't have the information. She doesn't know her husband is not Hand during that window of time. She doesn't know that her sister is insane. She doesn't know that Ned has a strained relationship with the king. All sorts of things. So she doesn't know that Tywin hates his son. So there's a lot of ways to get out of the to justify, and there's a lot of excuses for Catelyn here, but there's not many excuses for the chapter itself. It's a mess. It is a messy chapter. I don't know if there is a messier one. I mean, maybe I could make an argument about how messy. I mean, I'll make some like okay, like I think the Clash of Kings late Jon story is very messy. I think there's pieces of Tyrion's story in A Dance with Dragons that are crazy, but this is one of the messiest chapters. Anyway, not to be too negative on it, but yeah, there it is. Catelyn 5. Oof, Catelyn 5. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.